Hello, this is Ron Macklin. I'm the author of Everyone is Afraid, and I'm the podcast host of The Story in Your Head, as well as the CEO of the Imaginal community. In this episode for the Business Growth Architect Show, I will discuss all those stories that we have in our head and how we shape them and how they shape us. And in this episode for the Business Growth Architect Show, I will share how we create stories, how they shape our world, how it can create fear for us, create joy for us, and we're not really in control, and yet we really are. How this can shape your business, your relationships with your people at work, your family, your friends, and make your business much more profitable. If you want to learn more about this, jump right into the episode.
And hello, fabulous person. Beate Gillette here. I am the host of the Business Growth Architect Show, and I want to welcome you to today's episode where we discuss how to navigate strategy and spirituality to achieve time and financial freedom. Truly successful people have learned how to master both, a clear intention and a strategy to execute that in a spiritual practice that will help them to stay in alignment and on purpose. Please enjoy the show and listen to what our guest today has to say about this very topic. Hello and welcome back. Beate Gillette here, the host of the Business Growth Architect Show. And today I am with Ron Macklin. And Ron and I have had many conversations about the story we tell ourselves and the meaning we give things and what does it all mean. And it is important for you to listen to this episode specifically because we are going to challenge you in a number of different ways. Ron, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. First, thank you for what you do in the world, and thank you for the opportunity to have this dialogue again, to learn with each other.
Exactly. So, Ron, for somebody who's not familiar with your work, will you just tell them who you are, what you do, and what do you solve for your clients?
First, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a friend, and I really enjoy watching people grow. I don't mean like get taller or bigger or what all that stuff, but to build new stories that they get to live a good life from those stories. Like that's my passion in the world. They get to pay for their lives. They get to make a difference in the world. They create a world for themselves. And that's what I love to do. That's what my business is all about. Now, the fundamental of that is we're closed systems. Us humans. And some people go like, closed systems, what does that mean, right? We make up interpretations of the world. So, like, there's a space where things actually do happen in the world, but we don't get to perceive them. It's like it doesn't work that way. Like humans don't work that way. So how do we know the world? I mean, I'm pretty sure that I can see the computer in front of me and I can see a picture of Beate on the screen, and I can see all of that, right? But how do I know the world? Well, we make up interpretations. We make up stories in our head. That's why I named my podcast The Story in Your Head, is because we're always making up stories and we're always looking for meaning. That's what we do as humans. We try to find a space where we go, oh, this is what that means. Even little kids, you see them walking around and go, oh, so that's what this means, right? And we are on a constant quest for doing that. And that is the fun part of life.
I want to make this as real as we can possibly make it because on January 7th, my office burned to the ground in the Palisades fire. And on the 8th in the morning, our home burned to the ground. We have gone back to the site. There's nothing, like nothing. The jewelry, the memories are melted in a clump of unrecognizable whatever that even might be, but there's nothing. And so the story in my head, what the story in my head wants to do is ask, why is this happening to me? What is the meaning in this? If I look into the mythology of Phoenix rising out of ashes, my Chinese friend have told me that there's a saying that means the hotter the fire, the greater the prosperity, something along those lines. So I found that when this was happening, Ron, that I was looking for something I could compare this event to. And I've had my share of disasters.
but my brain couldn't relate it to anything that I had experienced. So take me through how these questions that I want to ask and the meaning I want to give it relate to what you do.
It is first. Let's notice that when something happens, we try to find something else to compare it to. Like we don't just go, oh look, this happened. We just go, oh, this is like this, right? Because we have a tendency to try to find meaning from something we already have. We've already made up a story before, and if we can find that, whether it's true or not, if we can find that meaning, right? And remember, this is not real. It doesn't like meanings floating around the world. When we capture some meaning, we make up a story that it is like the other thing. We're good. Like we go, okay, that's it. We're done. And when you can't find something like that, we're lost. Like we're still looking. We're like, I got to figure this out, right? What happened? Like there was a house, there was a studio, and then there wasn't a studio, and then there wasn't a house. That's what happened. What stories we make up from those things, that's the powerful part.
Let's go through that. So what stories can I make up about it? So one story of course is the poor me. This is so unfair. The other story I can make up, actually it's not really even made up, is to say that the city of Los Angeles failed us. I mean, it was literally a domino effect of failures that we've never seen before, where, there was no water, the fire trucks that were there needed power, there was no power, the generators weren't working, the planes couldn't fly because the wind was so high, the windstorm was at an event that we've never had seen before.
Oh, we can keep going. We can go with like global warming. We can go with all these winds are so high because of the atmospheres are changing and you have different weather patterns that have never happened before. We could go on and on and on and on and on. There's really three domains you got to look at, right? Are you into the poor me, right? Are you into that bad guy or girl, right? Or you're in the third one, which is, so now what?
The third one is the now what? Yeah. So I
so
probably.
Now what? So now what?
Yeah.
Right? You're like, as an example, you wreck a car and you go, I mean, what do you do? They ran into me, right? Bad guy, right? I don't want to have to go shop for a car. Oh my God, I hate shopping for cars. Okay, I get a new car. Like I'm going to go get a new car. There's going to be some insurance or whatever that is. And then there's going to be, but cars don't last forever anyway. And how do I go forward? What I notice is all three of those stories show up for me all the time. Like, why did this happen to me? And if they had done what they were supposed to do, this wouldn't have happened. But the third one is, and it's the most important one, what am I going to do from here? And it's not just about what am I going to do, like, well, I'm going to build this house, or I'm going to build a studio, or I'm going to rent a house, or I'm going to that's details. Are you going to look at this as a bad situation that you can't get over, or this is just another thing to work through? This is something I get to challenge myself on. I get to look at what we make it into a game, whatever we do with that, and the stories we create. Viktor Frankl wrote about this inside of the Holocaust. Actually wrote about it afterwards, but he noticed it in the Holocaust. And people would live or die based on their stories. And he could actually got to the place where he could notice when somebody was going to die because they smoked their cigarettes. And the cigarettes didn't kill them because it's just a cigarette, right? Mm-hmm. But the cigarette was a piece of money to go get something done because they wanted to know what from here. But the moment they lost that story about where do we go from here, they went into the poor me, or those suckers, those bad guys did this to me. They started to smoke their cigarettes. Within 24 hours, they were dead. And it wasn't the cigarette. It was the story in their head was gone about where they're going to go. What was keeping them alive was their story. That's how powerful our stories are. And when we don't realize that we make all the stories up, we can drift into culture. We can drift into, oh, poor me, or those bad people, and all that space. But all of that is just shifting the burden away from us. When we get and if it's a burden, you shift it away. If you go, this is an opportunity, then you keep it yourself.
So as a spiritual concept, then, I think that there is a part about the story where I watched myself now go through this pattern. It's like a pattern recognition almost. I could see it. Like I have enough awareness to see that this is happening in real time. And I could tell that when my brain couldn't find anything to compare it to, it literally just shut off, like mid sentence. It was so overwhelmed by not finding a pattern of recognition. So, as a multiple disaster survivor, I have, and a producer, I'm very practical about these things. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we are at the bottom: food, shelter, safety. Where do I sleep? What do I eat? Where do I go where I'm safe, where I can lock a door and whatever saber-toothed tigers can come and get me? But there is a piece sort of in this meaning, and I want to spend just a little bit more time on it before we move on to how do we implement this in business and strategically. So there's a just a brain pattern piece. What I'm hearing you say that almost runs automatically. How do I recognize when my brain does that? Can we help the audience just to say, this is how you recognize that you're telling yourself a story, or this is when you know you're falling into a story, or this is how you know when you get triggered by an old trauma? Is there any tips you can give them?
Yes. There are some things to help notice. And first, we have what I think is called the amygdala. And we have this, it's also been known as the hindbrain or the dinosaur brain or the reptilian brain. And it's a part of us and who we are, right? And all animals in the world have this, right? And what that means is when there's something going on, it reacts instantaneously, right? And normally it reacts quickly to threats, things that can scare us, things that harm us, things can end our lives or end those who we love's lives, right? And when your body does that, like when that part of the brain does that, it gets ready for, your body gets ready for fight, flight, or freeze, right? And those three things are all part of who we are, right? Possum plays possum, right? Freeze, right? Flight, bird, gone, right? Fight, bears, right? They charge in, right? In fact, I think it's a horse that if you push on a horse, the horse pushes against you. Like we normally, you push on animals, they run away. A horse will push into you, right? So they're fight, flight, or freeze. And your body's getting ready for that. Now, we may not notice what's going on in our brain because our brain's noticing our own brain, but we can notice our body, right? Do you feel your stomach get a little queasy, right? That's your body getting ready to fight, or freeze. Can you feel your hands start to get sweaty or palmy, and everybody does it a little differently, right? And our bodies do that when we notice our bodies, but we have to train ourselves to notice our bodies. Like we go, oh, I don't feel so good. What's going on? Oh, I can feel it. My hands are my knees, my legs, right? All that. All of those things are, oh, there's these things going on. My body's getting ready to fight, or freeze. Yeah. And now when we begin to notice that, we can go, what? Because it's not the world. Remember, we talked about it a little bit earlier. The world, we're closed systems. We don't see the world. We don't smell the world. We make interpretations of what we see and what we smell, what we feel, and what we touch, everything. So now it's like, what story am I telling myself right now? Is it valid? Who can I talk to? And that's one of the biggest parts right there is, who can I talk to? What is your network of help? The people you know in the world, people you're connected to, can say, hey, this is going on with me. And you can share that with them. And I think this goes into our spirituality conversation, right? Which is, spirituality for me is like whenever two people are together, there can be a connection there. There's a way to go about building the connection, but there is a connection there. And when you have somebody else to talk to, they can notice you differently than you do, right? And that gives you an ability to notice your stuff. But when you feel that stuff, especially if we're a flight person, right? We feel it, we go, oh, I want to run away from people, right? And get away. That's the moment you go, oh, I want to run away. But if I talk to somebody, I might notice something about myself that can help my stories. Because it's just an interpretation we've made up about it. You ever cried at a movie?
Yes, of course.
Right. Well, it's not really a movie. It's not happening. There's just light on a screen. and vibrations coming into the sides, and you cry, and all of a sudden you go like, or you laugh, and you go, but there's nothing really there. There's just light bouncing off of a wall and vibrations coming out of the wall, right? That's it. But our bodies can be fooled so easily, right? And we go like, oh, I'm crying, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm all those other things. And that's why, in case you didn't notice, we love the movies.
We do
Humans,
love movies because
we love the movies,
it make
right?
us feel a particular way.
They
Yes.
feel right. And that's not real. It's
Right.
not real. It's
But it
made
is
up.
real. But is it not? But
Well,
it is.
it is my reality.
Right.
It's not like your house did burn down. Yes,
That's a fact.
that's a fact. But your reality is somebody didn't take care of something, some bad person, poor me, or where am I going to go from here?
But I almost have like a reaction when you say, well, that's your story. I'm always wanting to argue with you over that. So what's the response? I bet
We,
you see this all the time in
oh
your
wait,
work. That's a
well,
pushback.
not just out there in the world. I see it right here in this guy, right? We love our stories, and we think they're real, right? And we've spent, well, for me, 60 years figuring out how they are real. But then, like when you begin to go, okay, so let's try out a different story. Then all of a sudden you go, well, it's different now. Like, so can you change your story? Yes. Can you forget the old story? No. I'm going to say that one again. Can you create a new story? Yes. Can you get rid of the old story? No. And that's hard, right? Because you go, but that story's still there. But
Yeah,
that
I think
story's still there.
the biggest change in the story was when I was doing a lot of spiritual work, and I have a lot of trauma, childhood abuse, and that was very real childhood abuse. I mean, these things actually did happen. And then when I got into what you talk about, looking at it, what meaning do you give it? So the reality is, he was a child with a mentally unstable mother who abused me because for whatever reason she has. And then you recognize that the meaning that this abuse had is responsible for how I love, how I work, how I take care of myself. So there's good things, unbelievably independent. I always figure out a way on how to get out of any situation, including the one I'm in right now. But then there are negative things about it. So what I want to do is I want to keep the parts of the story that are good and own them, but I don't want to keep the parts of the stories that are not good and blame her. When I realized that, I was like, what am I doing here? Can you explain sort of our response to say, well, I got here because I worked really hard, but I don't take the negative events that contributed probably just as much as my hard work or the reason why my hard work took place. It's almost like I want to divide it in my head. You know, can you explain what I'm doing here or what we typically do with the good and
Well,
the bad?
yeah, well, in our head, like our stories, right? We try to make sense out of the story. And there's parts of it we go, well, that hurt me and harmed me. But there's also something you did with yourself to create your world from that, right? So we can't control the stories we make up,
Mm.
right? But we can choose which ones we keep around and tell over and over again. Stories don't go away, they fade away. Like we can't say, I'm going to forget the story. And the longer you try to forget the story, the more the story becomes live,
Where the
right?
what is it? Where the energy flows.
That's that's what you're going to live.
Mm.
So if you look at it and say, okay, this is a part I don't want, then you just leave it alone and it will drift away. But not like it drifts away. It's not living in your head, but think about the stories that you want to keep. Those things you did well, those that are the skills you want to go or where you want to go. It's like, where do I go from here? When you have the stories about where I'm going to go from here, all those stories in the past, they fade. And There's one more important concept I want to put out here is we have a story that time exists. There really is a past, and there really is a future, and we're in the now, right? But in reality, all we have is now. And the stories of the past and the stories of the future, and all those stories we create when we remember that we create them. And that's one of the trickiest parts is to remember I'm making up the story all the time.
So now I'm a business owner. Now I am a coach, consultant, entrepreneur, and I am needing to use or make sense of this concept in my work.
Mhm.
How do I implement what we're talking about for my business growth as a strategy?
Yeah. Do you in this business, do you work alone or do you work with people?
I work with lots of people. Most people work with lots of people, yeah.
Most people do. I've really haven't met somebody yet that hasn't worked with people.
Yeah.
All of the people you're working with are just like us. They're making up stories in their head. And when you make a request for them to do something, if you don't go back and forth and know what it is, they're going to do exactly what they thought they were supposed to do, but it may not be in alignment with what you want. Unless you can stop and say, hold on a second, let's talk about this. What story did you make up over there? What story did I make up over here? Because we're making up stories as we go, right? And when somebody does something that's not what you want, most people they'll criticize them. They go like, nope, that's not it. Don't do that, right? When in reality, they're doing the best they can. They did everything they tried to do. They tried to do it the best they could, but they didn't understand the request. Now, whose fault is it that didn't understand the request? Both of us, right? So anytime you're coordinating or cooperating, creating with another human, there's a lot of dialogue that has to go back and forth to really understand each other's situation. And if we don't know anything about like what scares us, what scares the other person, we don't have any idea what their commitments are. Like, are they married, not married? Do they have kids? Do they have parents? Do they have all this other stuff? Do they have financial goals in life? If we don't understand all those things, we won't be able to make up a story that's even relevant to them, nor will they about us. And the more we are connected, the more we understand each other in business, then when we're working together, we're actually able to hold the same concerns and produce an outcome that's desired. Now, there's another step beyond making requests and doing all that.
Mhm.
When people can actually do this, the creativity goes through the roof. Like because they can try all kinds of neat ideas, try things on, add on to somebody else's something, add into something different, try something different, scrap it all, start over again. And there's no moods about like, oh, you didn't like that. Or you don't think I'm any good. All of those stories that are inside of our head, and whether we say them or not, and 99.99% of the time, we don't say it with words, but we say it with our body.
Right. I want to give an example. We can make this super real. I'm running a forum where I created a monthly accountability group for business owners that come together every month. They know what they're doing, but they need a group to talk about things that they need to do to get them to the next level. And I did a program that I do called the Super Simple Goal Setting, where I help them to set goals, but I don't do it in the SMART goal way. I'm not interested in that, not for visionary goals. And at the end of it, when I close this particular session, I always ask what worked and what didn't work. And when you do that, you have to prepare that they tell you what didn't work. And so two of them said, I wished there was more implementation with what do I do now that I have done this? And my first reaction, Ron, was, of course, immediately to go, I failed. I didn't do a good job. Oh my God. I missed something. And then I went into the new me, version 3.0, and I said, what a great idea. Tell me a little bit more about that. Let me understand exactly what you mean by that. so that I can create something or prepare something in the future. Because if they're experiencing this, then other people must be experiencing this. If 2 out of 5 have this question, then there's probably going to be more than that. But I find it's hard to detach the story of what that means when somebody says something perceived negative. What do you tell your clients when that happens?
First step is like be thankful that they shared. Like if we don't, if people don't really, and they're not authentic with us, and that's what they were being authentic. When people are authentic, the first thing we should say is thank you. Be grateful of the opportunity to see yourself through their eyes, right? That's step one. Always there. And then there's a space where you can go, oh, poor me, right? Like I'm not good enough, whatever that story is. And as far as I can know, and as far as I've been practicing with all my clients and everything else I do, everybody has that. And it's a way just to go, okay, there it is. Hello. And I used to have a long time ago, like I used to have a story that says, put it in the back seat. Like, oh, that's me, scared self, put it in the back seat, right? I don't do that anymore. What I say is, that's my scared self sitting right here beside me. If anyone wants to talk to my scared self, I'm right here. I could describe him. I could put him in place. I know where he's at. And he's just going to be there. Does that stop us? Did it stop you? Does it stop your clients? When you hear that, it's really cool to talk about it. And that's the scary part. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really powerful. I really appreciate that. I wanted to make you up. I wanted to let you know I kind of made it up first. Like, well, I guess I screwed this one up, but I can see now that you've made me a stronger person. Thank you for that. And acknowledge the help. And then where do we go from here?
I think it creates also ownership for people when they're working with you, that they recognize that you really invested in their success. And this isn't about going through a particular program that's tried, tested, proven. I think when you have this openness to say, I never thought about it like that. Tell me what you exactly are thinking about so I can percolate on that and then see if I can come up with something to make this better. There really is nothing negative about it.
There's nothing negative about it. And I want to put this in there, like the number 7 step of our whole how do you build a connection with somebody. The number 7 step is allow real contribution. That means somebody gets to contribute to you. And it's not like, oh, you can contribute to me. That was really nice, but you're going to brush it off. No, real contribution. And when somebody offers that to you and you accept it and say, thank you, and it makes me a little upset, but I get it. And thank you. And I really appreciate that. The connection between the two of you has become stronger because it's no longer you're the professor and they're the student. You're now connected in a partnership of living good lives.
I love that. Yeah, that's really beautifully said. Ron, for somebody who wants to find out more about how they can get the story out of their head into a better story, where do we send them?
Well, there's several places. You can always check out our podcast, The Story in Your Head. It's on Apple, Spotify, and on our website, macklinconnection.com. And you can check out some of our blogs on Imaginal Community, which is a Mighty Networks page. And you can always read my book, which is The Story in Your Head.
Which I have read.
That's a podcast. It's Everyone is Afraid. And that is what connects us, not separates us, right? And you can always reach me at ron@macklinconnection.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the podcast today and sharing your information. The more I do the work, the more I realize that the story, overcoming the story, is really a critical element of success, because you cannot operate in a situation when a story that is irrelevant to the situation is running that happened a long time ago. And when you are able to recognize that that's a story that's running and it has literally no relevance with this particular experience right now, it frees you up to make decisions that are important for right now and not based upon oftentimes a traumatized 7-year-old. And that, in my opinion, is a good place to be if you want to be successful in business. Ron, thank you so much for being on the show. I'll talk to you again soon.
Yata, thank you.
And that is it for us for today. If this episode resonated, go ahead and please share it with 1 or 2 people that need to hear about how they can get their story out of their head into a much better story. Thank you so much for listening or watching this episode of the Business Growth Architect Show. And until next time, and goodbye.
So appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for listening to the entire episode. Please subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star review, a comment, and share this episode with one more person so that you can help us help more people. Thank you again. Until next time. Goodbye.